The Jerrell Riggins podcast explores the intersection of business, education, leadership, and technology through constant conversations and business professionals, educators, and technology leaders. I'm your host, Jerrell Riggins. We have as our guest today Reverend Dr. Atu White, pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church, Springfield, Massachusetts. Dr. White holds a Doctor of Ministry degree and with a focus on organizational growth and leadership development from Andover Newton Seminary at Yale Divinity School. He serves as the president of United Baptist Convention of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. Dr. White is the chair of the board of trustees for the largest charter school in Western Massachusetts and the Dunbar Center Incorporated. Our conversation today will focus on leadership, kinetic movement, and relevancy from his book, God Loves Small. The book has 5 steps to relevancy. I see some similarities that we can glean from leadership roles if you are a pastor of a faith-based organization, a nonprofit, even a for-profit business. It highlights that you need to create a clear, relevant plan that produces energy, knows the target audience, and delivers effective service that we'll all benefit from. Yes, we are glad to have in the studio Reverend Dr. Atu White. Welcome and thank you for your presence.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, as we begin this conversation, could you just share a little bit about your ministerial journey and your inspiration for writing your first book, God Loves Small?
Yeah, sure. So I am a native of Georgetown, South Carolina, and I went to college at Morris College, majored in pastoral ministry. I went to Howard University School of Divinity for the Masters of Divinity, and then Andover Newton. So from that, I was called to preach in middle school, and I had one of those callings like Samuel in the Bible. I had it through dreams, and I would wake up and ask my mom, and then one day she sent me to talk to my grandfather, who was my pastor at the time. Mm-hmm. And, he basically said, well, Willie, next time you have those dreams, definitely ask, say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So through that, I accepted my calling to preach as a senior in high school. And then, the rest is history, as they say.
All right. I see here, I want to just read a little bit of snippet because it talks about accountability. What does accountability look like in your book? It says, God amazes me and will surprise you when you continue to see, make, allow, let go, and let rise. So each congregation must find that relevancy in ministry, because relevance is the ability to connect with your congregation and community, or to connect your congregation with its community. Talk to me about being accountable in the city of Springfield.
Yeah, so I think God places congregations for spiritual reasons and for natural reasons.
Okay.
And I think God places congregations in community so that we can be a beacon of light, a beacon of hope, so that we can be a place of healing. And we can be an answer to a lot of the problems and issues that arise within the community in which God has placed a congregation.
Okay.
And I think for me, accountability is being accountable to the essence of why God has called us, and being accountable to the essence of why we sit geographically where we are.
Okay. What practices or strategies should a leader use to clearly state the vision to get the buy-in from their stakeholders?
Yeah, I think, honestly, the strategies that we should use is, as the book kind of walks us through, see, make, allow, let go, let rise. It walks us through 5 steps in which we can begin to ask tough questions as a congregation. We can begin to be curious and think and ponder. C allows us to walk around and to observe what's happening. When we begin to make, that means we sit down and begin to ask tough questions of our government, tough questions of our congregation, tough questions around what's the direction, not only from a congregational perspective, but what's the direction of the city? Where is our city? Where is our community headed? What businesses will open or close? What Air Force bases will close or open? And so when we think about all of those things, it's part of us. It's part of how we envision our congregation being active and involved and a part of the life of the community in which we sit. And that's kind of what relevance is. Relevance is really getting to the heart of, are we being accountable? Are we being responsible to the community in which God has placed us? And so a few strategies a leader can use to state the vision is basically get a hold of what the vision is. And that's part of see, make, allow, let go, let rise. So seeing is geographically what's happening in our area. Making is, in short, a plan of action. Right?
Okay. All right.
And then we must allow, which means that there are some things we have to allow to happen, and then let go of some things, and then let rise what will come after that. So the vision takes into consideration those 5 components. Something else that's interesting that we cover in the book is that the vision in which we see or write, that's recorded in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2, the vision with Habakkuk the prophet did see. Right?
Yes, right.
That vision is birthed out of Habakkuk 1:1. And Habakkuk 1:1 states the burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see. So in order to have a vision, to write the vision, to make it plain, which Habakkuk 2:2 says, to write the vision, to make it plain that those who read it may run with it, Habakkuk 2:2 is birthed out of the burden of Habakkuk 1:1. And if we do not have a burden for our congregation, a burden for the community, if we do not have a burden for growth, if we do not have a burden for the next generation, then we won't be able to produce a vision of Habakkuk 2:2 that the congregation can read the vision and run with it.
Yeah. And that really means being relevant at the current time. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of a lot of congregations, they grow stale, they grow old, and not old age-wise, but old in terms of approach.
Yes.
Because as we grow and mature and develop as a society, our approach to ministry must also grow and develop and mature. Because we're ministering to people who are advanced in technology, for instance.
Yes.
So if we're not advancing in technology, then we're not meeting the needs of a population that's beyond where we are. And I say it, and I say this is a story. There's a lady in my congregation, true story. She's of a certain age where CDs are still what they do. She used to purchase CDs of the sermon, and she used to, play the CDs or hand the CDs out as a witness tool. Well, I guess about 7 years ago now, we transitioned to strictly online, which means all of my sermons and all of the services are online. And if you want to get it, you can go to our website, you can go to the Facebook, Instagram, what have you, right?
Yeah.
And YouTube. And she still asks for CDs. And in a generation where streaming is what's the word I'm looking for? Streaming is the way we do things right?
now. Yeah, that's the norm for now.
It's the norm. It's the primary mode of getting information. She still has the CD ministry or the CD mentality. And it's nothing wrong with that. But unless we recognize that the world is shifting and changing, we can be stuck with a CD ministry in a streaming world.
Yeah. That's right. Oh, so true. That is so powerful. Because that leads into, as you mentioned in your book, you reference your seasoned deacon, Steve Powell, who said these words to you that challenge your core. You are replacing old traditions to create new ones. Then he chuckled. How did that resonate with you? Here you are creating new traditions that one day will be obsolete.
Absolutely. So that's a part of it's three words I wrestle with in the book: anticipation, innovation, and excellence. And I do imagination and some other things, but two words. Anticipation is the ability to see what's around the corner. It's not asking what's new, but it's asking the question, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
And then innovation is allowing past successes to perish in order to give life to new ones. And so what Deacon Powell was telling me, he said, listen, you're replacing old traditions to create new ones. And then he chuckled. And it's that chuckle that always bothered me.
Okay.
In a good way, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that chuckle bothered me because it's like, wow, you're accurate. I am creating new traditions, but those new traditions will soon be replaced at some given point in time. And I think we need to be aware of innovation, which allows us to say, this was good for this season, this was good for this decade, this was good for this time period, but it's time to allow these traditions to perish in order to give life to new traditions, knowing at some point those new traditions will need to be replaced.
Yeah.
And so the idea of it is not that we don't honor the traditions that brought us, but we honor traditions that they brought us to this point and period in time so that we can go steps further, and then those traditions will need to be replaced so we can go steps further as well.
Yeah, and because I like when you also mentioned when you surround ourselves with insightful people, it ultimately fortifies the vision, the plan, and the message. And I think that's so powerful because if you got some insightful people, it creates that innovation and anticipation and imagination that you just spoke of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's with surrounding ourselves with a spiritual team
Mm-hmm.
that has several different skill sets that they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And as a leader, we must value all of the voices at the table, even the voices that do not disagree with me. I said this in the book, that we all need one cheerleader on our team. Mm-hmm. That one person who's going to say, yes, Pastor, you're doing a good job. Yes, Pastor, you're doing a great job. Just one cheerleader, right?
Yep.
That's going to encourage you no matter what.
That's right.
But outside of that one cheerleader, you need people on your team who's going to strengthen the vision, who's going to ask appropriate questions, who's going to vet ideas. So before I bring anything to the larger, my joint board, which is like 27 people, before I bring anything to the joint board, I have a small group of people, 4 or 5 people, who help me vet ideas. So once I bring it to the joint board, a lot of tough questions were already asked in private. So I'm able to kind of retool, reformat, and address those holes within the plan or within the vision. So when we come to joint board, it's further strengthened. So when we bring the idea or the vision to the congregation, by the time the congregation is able to receive it, now they're like, wow, this is very good, but it's been vetted by so many different people before the congregation even hears about it. And I think sometimes as leaders, we kind of bypass necessary steps to get us to a place where it's like, slow down, allow the vision to be processed, allow the vision to be retooled, reformatted, addressed, allow people to poke holes in it, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's by doing so, now we're able to strengthen what God has given us.
Yes.
And I think that's how having a team around you really benefit the vision and the work God has placed in our hands to do.
Yeah, because I like how you've said valuing time investment. People will no longer invest their time in disorganized and contentious church meetings, ministries with no real goals, and visions with no plan. And then you also mentioned conscious competency compels us to try to do our best and be our best. We represent God. So that's so insightful how you said you pull your smaller team together to make sure you're pulling out your best before you get to the larger group, leadership group. Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing 2020 should have taught all of us is the value of time.
Yes.
And many of us have come out of the 2020 pandemic very different, and our congregations are different. Simply because people no longer just will stay in service for hours on end or stay in meetings with no direction, or, the world has just shifted and changed.
That's right.
And so to value a person's time is to value the time by being organized. It's valuing the time by being concrete in what you're attempting to do, being upfront and open and honest. And all of that is a part of valuing time. The second element is realizing that there are some people who may not have 5 hours a week to donate to the church or to volunteer for the church, but they may have an hour. And so how, as a leader, do we say, if you have an hour to give to the Lord a week, we can place you here so you can give of your service? And it's placing people in the proper spaces and ministry to accomplish what God has put our hands to accomplish by valuing their time. The other element that you mentioned, conscious competency, is such a good part of the book that I like, because so many times we do ministry haphazardly. We do ministry on accident. We do ministry because it was passed down to us, but we never really think it through. And we should not do ministry haphazardly. God obliges us to co-create with him. And as a result, we have renewed minds, we open our eyes to refreshed mercies, and we walk by faith. And it's through that walking by faith and practice what God has brought to our mind and our ideas, our intentions and plans, and asking God to lead us through the journey and through making a coherent plan for our congregation to really follow. But we do that on purpose. And God is calling us to greater relevance through conscious competency.
Yes, yes. You mentioned 6 elements to consider when creating a plan: action, clarity, relevance, energy, audience, timeline, and evaluation. I'd like to just touch upon a little bit of this here, the relevance of the part of the conversation. You raised the question to ask God, what is our now and later? Given today's fast-paced time of essence, when you have a faith-based organization that's heavily dependent on volunteers, because the goal is, I guess, is to improve relevancy, keeping people engaged for now and position them for the future. Talk to us a little bit about your strategies around getting people to see what is God calling us now and later.
That's a good question. We process relevance on 2 levels, right? We process it, as you mentioned, on now and later. What is God calling us to do now, and what is God calling us to do later? And we keep that in mind, that our now and the steps that we do now prepares us for the later stage. I tend to spend a lot of time discussing later with my team, and spend the majority of the time talking about now with the broader congregation. There's a slight danger of information overload. So if I were to talk about 6 years down the road, it may intimidate the incremental process and progress of now. So for instance, our church grew numerically in Bible study and worship service, and we can no longer stay in our current building. And I remember vividly being in my 3rd year when our team had a series of meetings with an architect. And this architect mapped out an addition that to our old sanctuaries, our old building, that would net us about 6,000 square feet. And I asked them, well, if we do that, it's going to take up parking spaces. And then if we do that, it's going to cost $1 million+ for 6,000 square feet. But what if, down the road, we wanted a basketball court, or we wanted other classrooms, and we wanted this space and that space. And the plan worked for now, but it did not work for later. And so it's recognizing that relevance takes into consideration both now and later. And in doing so, we were able to really think through that if we were to do this, if we were to expand our building in this way, then we would hamstring our future. So relevance is both now and relevance is both later. And so what we needed to do then, in that particular instance, was build a team, build ministries that will reflect what we're attempting to do later. Oftentimes, congregations, they get stuck in both extremes. They get stuck in now and not worried about later, or they get stuck in worry about later and not focusing on now. And relevance requires the delicate balance between now and later. So the things you need to do now, today, it prepares you for later. So one of the things I did many years ago, when maybe the first year of my pastorate at Mount Zion Baptist Church in Springfield, Mass, is we implemented a finance ministry, because I recognized that if we did not implement a finance ministry, we would never be in a position to make other decisions down the road, because we needed the finance and the business of the church really addressed in an appropriate way, where this ministry, that's all they do is look at cash flow, pay bills, monitor the whole nine, right?
All right.
So we implemented this finance ministry. So fast forward 5 years later, when it was time for us to rescue the Dunbar Center when they were facing foreclosure, we had our finances in place. We already had our paperwork in place. We already had our revenue ready to go. And the beauty of now and later is, what steps do I need to take today in order for us to be in a better position for later? Because if we don't take those steps now, we won't be in a position to make decisions and choices later. And so that's basically, part of what relevance is as it relates to now and later.
Yeah, and I want to add this piece from the book. You said, God shoves us out from the table of being comfortable. God is nudging us to trust him with the promise he made to us and to embrace the next chapter of life, ministry, and opportunity. So as the leader, you raised the question, the church is growing stale. We stop exploring and developing. So how did you go about letting them know, okay, we don't want to grow stale, and getting them ready, like the finance committee? Is there other things you wanted to do, bring in technology as well, and other things to help the relevancy of the ministry there as being the leader?
Yeah, so absolutely. A few things I do at the congregation that they're well aware of is we don't mind walking and living in innovation, allowing past successes to perish in order to give life to new ones, right?
All right.
So we had this harvest day. We started it the first year. It's like we give out fresh fruits and vegetables. We partner with local farms, and we give out, we bring in people to do workshops and sessions. And we started doing this. And the first year we had like 100 people. The second year it was like 200 people. And literally it grew every year. This is at our old facility. And so by year 5, I said, this is our last year doing this. And people were like, this is our last year doing it. And the last year we did it, we had nearly 600 people who showed up that day, right?
Okay.
And I said, it's our last year doing it, because allowing a success to perish doesn't mean that it still isn't successful. It simply means that God is calling us to do something next, right? And so we ended Harvest Day after 5 years, and we ended the year that we had 600 people. Well, that same year, God was leading us to purchase the Dunbar, unbeknownst, right? That came out later that year. So as a result of shifting our focus from Harvest Day, now what we were able to do one day a year we're able to do it on a larger scale now. So now we purchased the Dunbar and we operate it with several partners. We have the Food Bank of Western Mass, where we reach 350 households every month with fresh fruits and vegetables. We have the Urban League and the Brown Bag Program with over 300 households a month that we reach through that. We have the YWCA that does free supervised visitations for parents who need to see their children. We have before and after school programming. We have sports, basketball, and volleyball. We have 7 different schools that use our facility for their athletic programs. And we're open, from 5 in the morning till 6 p.m. But if we were so focused just on Harvest Day, then we would miss opportunities that God was placing before us because we were not willing to let a past success die in order to give life to a new success. But sometimes, as you said, and as I record in the book, God shoves us out from the table of being comfortable. And when God begins to nudge us, we just have to trust it and embrace the next chapter of life, of ministry, and opportunity.
Yeah, because you also mentioned in the book, allow outgrowth. And you said the culture of our congregation should not hinder or hamper our approach to doing business. Times have changed and churches are under greater scrutiny, and rightfully so. Churches can no longer claim ignorance of the laws or accounting practices. And then you mentioned we must outgrow those dated approaches as we think through strategies to make our congregation relevant to our present age. So you was building on the past, getting ready for the future. Now you have the Dunbar Center, and everything is mushroom and grown exponentially from there. Any other thoughts you like to share about the allowing the growth and getting prepared for that now and later?
I think as a congregation, and particularly now, because we're still in a season right now where I've been meeting with my joint board for the last couple of months, really saying, okay, God is shifting us again. Because we just can't get stuck in success, because at some point we'll reach the pinnacle of success and begin to decline. But it's always being aware, it's looking, it's having the appreciation for a God who continues to produce life. And with life is opportunity. And with opportunities, there is breath within our bodies. And so really thinking through and processing and appreciating this God of life is allowing God to continue to breathe new life into our congregations.
Psychologist Harry A. Overstreet observed, he said, the very essence of all power to influence lies in getting the other person to participate. And as the leader, servant leader, you've done that to influence your congregation to participate and allow God to work through you, through all of you all, to be the light and the beacon in the community. Are there any other last comments or encouraging words you'd like to share to our listening audience as we wrap up today?
Yeah. So, honestly, one thing I've devoted myself to over the next couple of years is doing sessions with congregations to really help them see that God isn't calling you to be necessarily a mega church, but within a small church setting, you can be relevant to your community. With 10, 15 people, your uniqueness, your giftedness that God has placed within the congregation, it is some benefit to the community in which you sit. And so while God isn't calling us to grow and be mega, God is calling us to be relevant.
Yes.
And, if a congregation wants to, contact me, I'm willing to come and sit down with them and really kind of work through to help them become what God has created them to be.
Great. Well, thank you again, Dr. White, for being our podcast guest, talking about your book, God Loves Smalls. And I want to just conclude that God Loves Smalls is a guidebook to help leaders and congregations craft doable plan for a dynamic ministry. God Loves Small will show out your ministry how to have a faithful, fun, moving from stagnation to relevance. because relevancy is the goal. Again, thank you again for being here. I just want to leave these words for pastors, CEOs, and leaders in the words of Booker T. Washington. If you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else. Until the next time, remember, kindness is free. Sprinkle it everywhere you go. I am your host, Jerrell Riggins. Peace and blessings.